U.S. jobless claims have passed 40 million. The market continues to bounce. In America, ready or not, it's getting back to work. But this time, we're all getting sign-on bonuses. That's right. My name is Tony Martin, and this is How to Get the Jobs Weekly Review. Thanks so much for joining me. Like I said, my name is Tony Martin. If you don't know where I am on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. Feel free to follow me on all those platforms. Also take a look at me on LinkedIn. I think I'm everywhere where I should be. Some people have told me I should be on TikTok, but I think if I went to TikTok, I would lose my precious subscribers. So you can follow me where all my stuff is relevant and where I should be. Next, today, in case you're watching the market, we're about, 26,200. That's right. I mean, it's 10% off its highs back in the first or second week of February. But that's a far cry from where we were 45 days ago. 45 days ago, we were about 18,600. That's down 36% of where we were from the year high, from the all-time highs. And we've been able to rebound to be just 10% below those highs. Now, what is interesting about that is that the government has obviously had a big factor in that as we've had trillion-dollar spending packages and as we continue to pump money into the economy to try to bolster everything. If you don't know me, I'm a very passionate political junkie. My goal, though, is if you don't know me, that when this show is over and that when other shows in the future are over, you still won't know what side of the spectrum I'm on, because I want to try to give you, from what I see, the facts and from where things are. Today, we're going to discuss, like I said, we're all getting sign-on bonuses. Here's why. And we're going to be going through a quick overview of resume writing as well as weekly Q&A. So as always, if you have questions that you want to ask, that you want to be part of the conversation, make sure you start putting them in the comments throughout the course of this discussion. And when I get to the Q&A section, I'll make sure that I answer those questions first. I have questions that I've already received throughout the week from clients, and I'm going to be answering those as well, but I will gladly answer the live ones, and they take priority. Now, there was an article that came out this week from CNBC, and it's talking about that right now we're in this, this black swan event. We don't know what's going on, but jobless claims are continue to rise. Now, fortunately, this is the 9th week in a row that the jobless claims have declined, but still, we're over 40 million people are unemployed or looking for work. So the federal government, as most people know who are unemployed, have received a $600 federal unemployment benefit enhancement on top of the state unemployment benefits that they might already be receiving. These benefits, as we know it, will expire on July 31st. So then the question is, what happens after July 31st? And there's a couple of different plans right now that are going through the Senate that are being discussed. Actually, probably about 3. It seems like one on the Democratic side and a couple on the Republican side that are part of the discussion. And I wanted to share those with you so you can kind of see what happens after July 31st or what happens up until July 31st, as well as some of the challenges with both of the plans, as well as the benefits to both of the plans. So, like I said, our jobless rates have increased. Now, the challenge right now with their unemployment benefits, the way they are with the federal assistance, that 2 states out of 50%, over 50% of the labor force makes more in those 2 states, which is Arizona and Kansas. They make more, 50% of the workforce makes more to be on unemployment than to have a job. That's a problem for those 2 states. Now, we can all say, well, hey, it's just 2 states. That's not a big deal. But if I told you 32 additional states, 40% of the labor force makes more on unemployment than they do actually working. That's a bigger problem, right? So now we're talking about 34 out of 50 states, we have 40% or more of the people who could be working or are working would benefit from being unemployed financially. That's a discouraging number, and that's the challenge, okay? So the current plan, that's the way it is. We get people who are unemployed get $600 more a week on top of their state benefits. That amount equals more than they would make normally. So what do we do about this? Because first of all, on July 31st, that's going to end no matter what. At least the way it's currently written. Unless something is amended, something's changed, something's added, that is going to end. So what do? So the Democrats have a plan, and the Democrats' plan is called the Worker Relief Security Act, okay? The Democrats, they want, because we don't know when this pandemic's going to end, we don't know how much support we're going to need as a country, as people, we don't know what's going to happen. So what's going to happen is that they want to extend the unemployment benefits by a tier system. Tier 1 through 6 is kind of how they've decided to do it. And if you're on a tier 6, that means that your unemployment in the state is still over 9.5%. If you're at a tier 5, unemployment is somewhere between 8.5% and 9.5%. And depending on what tier the state is, they're going to give you additional monies to stay on unemployment because you can't go back to work. The opportunities aren't there. They've also created another incentive line saying that if unemployment in your state, say it's at 6%, which would be like a tier 2, so you should only get no additional monies for unemployment, but the state is still social distancing severely, then you're still going to be able to get an additional $350 a week on top of your unemployment. So that's a Democratic plan. Democratic plan is to taper it down and to drag it out to allow you the time you need to get back on an employed status. Now, the Republican plan, they have a sign-on bonus plan. The Republicans want to pay you $600 a week until July 31st if you get hired tomorrow. So if you get hired tomorrow, then every single week you will receive an additional $600 sign-on bonus to go back to work. The challenge with that is that after July 31st, you go back to your normal paycheck. So really, if you get hired tomorrow, the paycheck you received on June 15th would be more than the paycheck you receive on August 15th. So they're incentivizing you to go back to work. Now, there's also a secondary Republican plan too, which says, screw it. We're not going to give you $600 a week. We're just going to give you a $600 check today, and you are not going to get the additional weekly incentives. So if you got employed tomorrow, then guess what? That $6,000 is mostly yours to not spend on bills because now your job is going to pay for your bills, so it becomes a $6,000 sign-on bonus. If it's 4 weeks down the road, well then a fraction of that $6,000 is what you're given as a lump sum payment. Now, there's pros and cons to both of these plans, okay? On the Democratic side, the pro is that they're trying to take care of people, and they're looking at a way to ensure that people who can't afford their bills if they don't make any money, because I think it's something, unfortunately, very high, like 90% of our American people don't have $1,000 to their name or something like that. I'm making that up, but I know it's the majority of us don't have savings, okay? So that's very unfortunate. So they're trying to figure out a way to do that. The challenge with the Democratic plan is that it kind of keeps people incentivized not to work. Because if I'm going to make more on unemployment, why am I going to go to work? Now, there certainly is the feeding of your soul to have a job. I get that. But for some people, feeding your family is more important than feeding your soul. And if I can feed my family sirloin and lobster as opposed to feeding my family on what I was making, then that's not as beneficial, right? So there's that side to it. The other challenge with it is that as you're doing this, you're keeping the unemployment level maybe higher than it needs to be. So that's the Democratic plan, the Democratic challenges. On the Republican side, the sign-on bonus thing, it incentivizes maybe people to take the wrong job. Maybe you take the job today, so all of a sudden tomorrow unemployment claims drop, and you go take the job at a different establishment. But then on July 31st, when all of a sudden you're going to receive that pay cut because the benefit is over, the bonus is over, you quit. Then unemployment rise again. Maybe people aren't going to be in the right jobs. Maybe companies are going to hire the wrong people, and hiring costs money, people. I have been a staffing recruiting professional long enough to know that hiring costs lots of money. So you're going to have a lot of turnover potentially with the Republican bonus plan. But both plans have their pros. They're trying to solve a problem, and they're trying to look at a problem. I personally have seen the fact that the impact of having a high unemployment federal benefit, okay? What I have seen is I've gone to get a haircut. I've mentioned it many times on this platform because I'm quite excited about being able to get a haircut again. And I have seen when I've walked in that there's 2 stylists, hairdressers, barbers working, and there's 10 empty chairs. And I've asked the last time I went, hey, is this because of social distancing? You can't have so many people in here? And they've said, no, we can't get these people to come back to work because they're making more than they would working here. They're making more now on unemployment. So this is a message for all you guys. Tip your barbers. Tip people who deserve to be tipped and are doing a job you don't want to do. Okay, so I think that's that topic. Now let's continue rolling here because we've got a lot to get to today. I want to discuss a little bit about, I have another article, but I'll save it to the end because I don't want to run out of time. So let's talk a little bit about bullets on a resume and how to write a bullet smartly. And I've discussed a little bit of this in the past, but I think it's important because I want to go through a detail-oriented or as detailed as possible because I've gone through this stuff in the past few weeks with several clients. And it seems like some of them are hearing it for the first time, so I really want to make sure it's important. So we've all heard the SMART acronym. Specific, measurable, achievable. I think it's realistic, timely, and yeah, that's SMART. So when you're writing a resume bullet, every bullet on your resume should be specific. It should be specific with numbers. It should be specific with people you've led. I mean, if you're in sales and you're selling something, your client wants to know how much it's going to cost them, how much time it's going to save them, how much productivity is going to increase because they purchase your services. If an employer hires you, they want to know how much money you're going to save them, what kind of achievements you're going to have, and how strong you're going to be for them. So they want specifics, so put that in your resume. Next, it should be measurable, okay? We should make sure that it's something that you can quantify. And what I mean by that, I'm going to read this one, but this is actually a bullet that I got this week that I was able to modify to the second bullet. So the first bullet read, strove to create a more positive work environment. The more we talked about it, the more we dissected it, the more questions I asked, the more it turned out that this person actually created an employee engagement program that measured where the motivation of the employee morale was prior and where morale was a year later. So they actually had a measurable, tangible result. So we turned strove to create a more positive work environment into improved optimism in the office by creating an employee engagement program that measured and increased the office's morale by 10% over the course of a year. We have just turned okay, that's nice kind of bullet into, wow, you created a program, you measured the response, and you're able to now report on how that affected the company. That's what employers want. Next, make sure the bullet's achievable, okay? Far too often, I see bullets that you didn't specifically achieve, but the company did, okay? If you joined the sales force on September or October, and then in December, the year end comes and the sales department increased their sales by 27%, I highly doubt that you had any significant impact in that 2 months that you were part of that department. I'm guessing all the momentum from the previous year, previous first and second quarter really led into that third and fourth quarter run up. So be sure that you achieve them, not that you were just a spectator. I kind of like using the analogy that I'm a Patriots fan, and yes, we're still hurting a little bit. I'm excited to see what we can do without Tom Brady. However, we've won, the Patriots, 6 Super Bowls in the past couple decades. Now, it's silly for me to act like I had any part in that Super Bowl victory runs, right? So don't treat your company like being a fan, like I would for being a Patriot fan. There's a difference between being a coach, a fan, and a player. Employers are hiring players. They don't want to know you can do the job. They don't want to know you know how to do the job. They want to know you can do the job, and they want to know you've done the job or have the aptitude to do the job again. So that's achievable. Next, relevant. Typically, you want to make sure that it is, the word's realistic typically, but I'm going to use the word relevant because you want to make sure that your bullet is relevant to the role you're applying for. This is probably the most important part of this whole little lesson. If you're applying to a job that requires you to be an outfield coach for the Houston Astros, I seriously doubt they care that 6 months ago you were a manager at Benny's or something like that. Make sure that your bullets are relevant to the job you're applying for. And if you have to stretch your mind, because you can always figure out, well, it's kind of relevant because of this and that, and I was dealing with people, I'm going to be dealing with players, and I had to, organize lots of stuff. And if you can kind of stretch your mind to thinking it's relevant, don't write it probably, because I can't get inside your mind. The hiring manager can't get inside your mind. Nobody thinks the way you do, otherwise they would be you, okay? And I think that's a benefit for most because I'm kind of crazy sometimes. So nobody wants to think like me. But with that, realize that nobody can draw those lines, those dotted lines, to the reason why you put that bullet on there unless it's relevant. So make sure that when you're looking at the job description, you can quickly look at a job description and say, okay, it's a 50% sales job, 25% leadership job, 25%, customer relations job. Make sure that your bullets match that and are relevant to the job, okay? Next, timely. When it comes to your resume bullets, make sure that they're major milestones. Make sure that they mark the timeline and how long it took you to get those individual accomplishments done. Don't say that something took, if something took you a year and a half and it's not clear because maybe you were in the role for 7 years, then put accomplished in a year and a half, or whatever the case may be. It'll help the recruiter understand the scope of the project you were on, how long it took you, what kind of team you had, things like that. And then next, make sure for timely as well that when you're applying to the job, you do it as quickly as possible. I've talked about this before. If you apply to a job, if a job goes live today, Thursday, June 4th, and you apply to it on Tuesday, I can't do the math, and forgive me because I am way too amped up right now, but if the June 9th, if you apply to it June 9th, 5 calendar days, 3 business days from now, at the end of that day, guess what? You're likely not going to get your application read, because on Thursday, on Friday, and on Monday, you had probably 500 people that already applied to that job ahead of you. So timely. Stay on those job boards. Make sure you're applying to jobs as quickly as possible. However, don't rush through the application. Make sure that you're customizing your resume for that role. I have articles about that. That's pretty much what I do right now is I help people with their resume, and I make sure that we're customizing them for the opportunities that are most likely to show up or the specific ones that they're ready to take. So remember, you need to show your prospective employer that you can do the job, not just that you know how to do the job. You need to make sure that they understand that, and that's how you do it with a smartly written resume filled with smart bullets. All right, questions now. If you have any questions, always pop them in the comment section. I will make sure I get to them. Otherwise, I will start ripping off these questions that I received this week from different clients. Russ in Clear Lake asked, what do you recommend as the best new title on your LinkedIn profile in an active job search? So if you are currently active and looking, what should you put on your profile? First of all, I think you need to focus on your strengths in general terms, okay? You need to be open to similar opportunities, not specific opportunities. And what I mean by that is if Chris is a medical sales device professional, he sells medical equipment or medical sales device. If he's a medical device salesman and he sells medical equipment, don't put medical device professional, with sales or whatever. Put experienced salesman looking for blah, 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 looking for an opportunity or something like that. Because sales accounts for the 100% of the industry. Every company wants to sell something, but medical devices only account for maybe 1% of the market. So make sure your title will grab more people than less. Now, yes, as they read through Chris's profile, they're going to realize that Chris doesn't have the oil and gas background, the energy background, the water background, the technology background they're looking for. But guess what? They're going to read Chris's profile. Whereas if it just said medical sales, blah, 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 they're not even going to click on him. You want to get as many clicks. You want to get as deep into any process as you possibly can. So don't eliminate yourself from the discussion by narrowing that topic on the top. When it comes to your resume, same type of thing. Make sure that your resume, you don't really have a title on your resume, but you have a professional summary perhaps. I'm not a fan of the objective. I've talked about this before. Your objective is to get a job. You probably shouldn't put objective on your resume. Put professional summary on your resume, but you can always put in that seeking a role as, in whatever the job you're applying towards is, in whatever the company you're applying towards is. So seeking a job at XYZ company as a blah, blah, blah professional. All right. Jeff in Houston said, when should you follow up after an interview? Well, there's two types of follow-ups, Jeff. After an interview, first of all, when the interview is over, your last question should always be, where do we go from here? Thanks so much. I had a great discussion. When will I be hearing from you next? I'm really excited about this opportunity. Something to the effect of that you're excited about the opportunity and you'd like to know when you think they're going to make a decision. That's going to give you the green light, because then you can follow up when they say, yeah, we're interviewing 5 or 6 people. We hope by next Friday to be able to contact you and let you know where we're going from there. Great. Next Friday is June 12th. So do you mind if I email you on Monday then, if I don't hear from you on the 15th? No, not at all. Great. You've just gotten permission to now email them on the 15th. So you don't look like that awkward high school kid that I was, that, you want to be excited about going to the prom, but you don't have a date, but you do want to ask somebody, but you don't want to look too too excited about the opportunity, but you want to look like you have some things going on, but you want to be engaged. Look, do that. You then know that on June 15th, you're going to follow up. That's the right timeline. Next. You should always follow up the very next day, though, with an email to everybody you spoke with. Now, sometimes the people you spoke with, they're not going to give you your business card. You're not going to have their contact information correct. But hopefully, you'll have the initial person's, the recruiter's contact information, and then you can figure out if it's first name dot last name at companyname.com, if it's first initial dot last name, based on the recruiter's format for their email. But here's what I'll also tell you, too. CC the recruiter, phone screener, the person who has arranged all this for you, CC them in every communication, which means every communication should be different. Your VP letter should not be the same exact letter you send to the manager that you send to the analyst or whatever. Whoever interviewed you, you should be taking some notes during that interview, and you should be able then that evening to sit down and reflect on what each one of those people told you. And then when you're writing your thank you letter for taking the time to talk to you, you're addressing their specific conversation with you. You can always have the front to be the same, the first sentence to be the same, the last sentence to be the same, but the meat of that paragraph should be unique to that conversation. By CCing the recruiter on it, you've now allowed them to then see, wow, this guy actually listened to each one of those things. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, the recruiter's not really the decision maker, right? It's the hiring manager. I need to impress the hiring manager. Yes, but no. I have been in many hiring processes where a candidate would see different people, meaning maybe the guy on Monday saw the VP, the director, and the senior manager, but on Tuesday, the VP wasn't available. So they saw 2 managers and 1 senior manager. And then on Wednesday, they saw the same VP. So each person might have saw somebody different or might not have seen everybody. However, the recruiter is usually the only person that has interacted and continues to interact with every candidate, which means they are the most important person in the hiring process, most likely, not the hiring manager. Because at the end of the day, the hiring manager is going to sit down with the recruiter and say, so what do you think? And the recruiter is going to say, well, what do you think? And the hiring manager is going to be like, well, I liked Tony. I liked Horatio. I liked Leslie. I liked Albert. I liked them all. And I liked these 2 guys more than the others. So what do you think? And then the recruiter is going to be able to say, well, you know what? Albert was extremely polite to me the entire process. They were super engaging. They actually, I know you got a thank you email from him. He wrote a specific thank you letter for every single person he spoke with, and none of them were the same. That person is the only person that's most likely guaranteed, and there's no absolutes in recruiting, but is most likely the person that's guaranteed to have seen everybody. And their opinion is what's going to matter most to sway that hiring manager from hiring Albert to hiring Eric. Often, that's the big difference. So make sure that you're keeping them engaged, you're treating them the way you'd like to treat them, and you'll be in good shape. Sharon from Cyprus, do job bullets have to go exactly where you accomplish the task? This is a good question, okay? So you know me, be honest on your resume, right? But there have been times where when I was promoted to a talent acquisition manager, And before that, I was the senior manager. Well, guess what? When I was, or not senior manager, I was the senior recruiter. Well, when I was the senior recruiter, I still had people reporting to me. Actually, when I was a senior recruiter, I had more people reporting to me because when I became the manager, there was a decline in the market, and I had to lay a whole bunch of people off. So if I led a team of 9 recruiters globally under the manager, technically I'm lying because it actually happened when I was a senior recruiter. However, I was a leader over 9 people regardless of when I did it in that company. So by putting it as the manager, it might make it pop more because it makes more sense. It doesn't show that I went from leading 9 to leading 3 or whatever. So I might do that because I did lead 9 people. I didn't do it during that last year. I did it during the second to last year before my promotion, but then we went into a recession. So you can always figure out ways to manipulate the data to be honest about your accomplishments, but they don't have to exactly go where they went if you can think of a logical reason not to. Sometimes, like I'm working on a resume this week for a client, it's very top heavy. We haven't gotten to the final version yet, but there's like 15 bullets for her last 5 years of work. And she's been with the same company for 10 years. And she was promoted into that role. And we're gonna have to flood some of that stuff out and put that under other stuff because otherwise it's a big block of information that no one's gonna read. And it's not necessarily, when you get interviewed, they're not gonna say, oh, well, tell me about this time as a manager you did this. So you led a team of 9 people, what was that like? Okay, well, good. It doesn't matter that it happened in 2019 or 2017, but it happened and you did it and you can talk about it. So, and if they did ask you about it, you can say, well, honestly, here's the truth. We were in a recession. I knew that I wanted to make sure that people saw that because I thought it was relevant, but I didn't think they were going to see it if it was in a big block of information. So I actually led these people in a different role or whatever, but you can talk through that. But the point is having the opportunity to talk through it. And sometimes if it's hidden in a sea of information, you're never going to have the opportunity because that 15-second scan that the recruiter does isn't going to get to that bullet. All right. And then the last question. So if you do, again, I will gladly take a live question to make sure that I appreciate everyone who's watching right now. So thank you for watching. But the last question I had, which was actually from last week, but I never got to it because I ran out of time, was just what are some general, and this is a lot of what I talk about with clients. What are just some generic steps you can take to make your resume better? I don't want to pay anybody. I don't want to partner with anybody. I just want to make sure that my resume is as strong as it can be. So I have 12 steps, 12 points to make, and I'll go through them as fast as I can. And but I want to make sure that we don't just glaze over 1 or 2 because each one I think are important. Otherwise, there'd only be 11 or 10 or 9. So the first thing is generic and bland. Your resume shouldn't be generic and bland, okay? So it shouldn't look like you could apply to being a sales manager or a chef. They should look like they were written for the job you're applying for, okay? There's a difference between having a resume that you're filtering out during a networking event and a resume that you're actually using for an application. For a resume you're using for an application, it should not be generic. It should be very specific, especially the professional summary on top. Next. Be careful about banding job details together. For example, maybe you were a construction manager and you were overseeing 5 hotels that were $500 million total. And you can band that, led the construction project for 5 multi-million-dollar hotels, delivering them on time, on budget, blah, blah, blah. However, if there's a component of that job that was vendor management and you had a bunch of subcontractors or you had a bunch of vendors you were leading, don't roll that in. Make sure that's an independent bullet about vendor management. If there's a bullet about your budgets that's really unique or things like that, make sure you don't just roll in all of the information into one long glob of information. Make sure you break it out into individual accomplishments because, again, that makes it much easier to customize that resume when you're getting ready to apply to a role where there's going to be a lot of subcontractors you're managing or a lot of vendor management or whatever the case may be. It's going to make sure that you can copy and paste elements of that much quicker. 3, I know you know every company you ever worked for, and I know that you probably think every company is pretty well known, but they're probably not, okay? Unless they're Pepsi or Coke or whatever. Some people may not know who the company is. And again, that very first person that's reading your resume often is someone with less experience than the person who's going to be hiring you. So you want to help them. So the way I format resumes for most companies is I would say you put the company name, you put your position at the company, and then under that, before your bullets, you put one sentence, maybe two, company overview, as well as maybe what your specific job was. That's going to help the recruiter figure out that, all right, apples and apples, this company kind of does what we do, so I should take a look at his resume or her resume. Next, references. Again, there's no absolutes here, but for the most part, you shouldn't put your references on your resume. You should make sure at the most you put references available upon request. I had a lengthy discussion about this last week, I think, or the week before, so check it out there. But references, don't need to put them on there. Keep your friends, keep your references, private information, private. Don't keep adding job after job after job after job, especially if the jobs were years and years ago. So you don't need 5 bullets for jobs that were 15 years ago. Unless, there's always an unless, right? So no absolutes. Unless that job you did 15 years ago is most relevant to the job you're applying for now. So when I work with clients, my goal is to make the resume that we work on together as long as possible, but then also discuss how to shift it and shape it and how to remove things that aren't relevant to what you're applying for. But I don't know today what's going to be the most applicable 6 months from now. Because maybe 6 months from now, there's, again, and I worked with this with a client last week who is a president of a company. He is leaving in a week from being the president, and he wants to become a VP because he doesn't like the bureaucracy of working with a board. He doesn't like he doesn't have as much hands-on time with his employees to mentor and coach, and that's what he's passionate about. And when he was a VP, he was the happiest. So he's actually looking for a VP role. But if I told him to not create bullets from 6, 7 years ago that are more in depth, well, then we're doing him a disservice for the job he's trying to get. But make sure that just because you did a job, it has a reason to be on your resume. I mean, I always say put it on your resume, but make sure the bullets below it actually have value and bring value for what you're applying for. Your resume can't just keep getting longer just because your experiences get longer. Make sure they're relevant experiences. That goes back to the top of what we talked about today about smart resumes. 6, resume is not a story. Don't write it in the third person. Don't write it in the first person. If you can figure out how to put you, don't put it in the second person. Okay? It's not I did this, or as the manager did. No, it's starts with a verb, move on through. At the most, you can say we or my or I in the professional summary at the most, but even I try to limit that to the minimal as possible. Don't mention hobbies on a resume unless they're relevant. I will say this is an exception to some people. If you're fairly new in the workforce, if you're graduating college, some of your hobbies might be your passions. You might have had leadership roles in some of these hobbies or some of these nonprofits. So there's some area where I can justify that. But for the most part, leave your hobbies off your resume. Nobody cares you like fishing and hunting and online dating or whatever it is you kids are doing nowadays. Nobody cares about that. They care about, can you do the job? Not what are you going to do in your off time. Which also, I don't think I have this here, but if you're getting, I should make a 13th. This will be number 13. I'll skip to the bottom and I'll come back because I won't have this one. If you're getting any kind of education more than 6 months from now, leave it off your resume. I don't care if you're projected to get your master's degree in December of 2020. I know you think it's a big deal, and it is a big deal in January of 2020. But in December of 2020, 6 months from now, you know what it looks like? It looks like a time commitment. It looks like you are not going to be 100% invested in my company because you have to get your master's degree in your off time or when you should be working. If it's inevitable, if you're getting it in 2 weeks or a month, put it on your resume. Projected July 2020. That's fine. But don't put something you're projected to get more than 2 months out, because I will look at it as an employer as you are dividing your time between me and your personal interests. And I will benefit from your master's degree, but I don't benefit from you getting your master's degree. I hope that makes sense. So now we're on 8. Spell check, spell check, spell check. I am terrible at spelling. I will spell the word break that I mean B-R-A-K-E, and I will spell it B-R-E-A-K. Make sure you spell the word break correctly. Make sure you spell the words correctly. Make sure that you're putting things where they need to be and in the right way. Read it over, have someone else read it over, because often when you read it over, you still put the words in that you don't mean to put in, or you skip the word that you skip putting in because you don't read it the same way. Have someone else read it for you. Don't blast your resume on resume blaster sites. I can't even tell you what one is because I don't use them. But don't just blast your resume out there and hope to get a response. You can do it, but no one's going to call you, most likely. Job postings, PDF versus Word. I've always said that if you're going to send your resume to someone via email, do it in a PDF. That way you can make sure that the margins are correct, make sure that everything looks the way it should be, make sure that the jobs finish up correctly. But don't just don't send the PDF out to, don't apply with a PDF, okay? Now, maybe applicant tracking systems have gotten better in the past couple of years. I honestly haven't used an ATS in a couple of years, but don't just naturally apply with the PDF because the parsing software doesn't always parse the resume well, and you'll be able to figure that out because as soon as you push submit, the next page is usually auto-generated from what it absorbed from your resume. It might put your name in there, your address, and if you see things are wonky, I would just back out of the process and resubmit with the Word document and then check it out, and it'll probably be better. So when you submit your resume, submit with a Word, in my general opinion. I have worked with hiring managers, though, who didn't like that. So, but this is just for your safety, for your sanity, I guess if you're trying to apply to multiple jobs. Shiloh, can the acceptance into a master's program be listed as achievement to add value if you've chosen not to pursue it? That's a really good question, Shiloh. You're catching me on an off-the-cuff kind of moment. My gut says no, because your GPA should show that you're strong, and you can easily say the same thing because, again, you've now created a concern that you might be pursuing your master's. If you've created any concern in the hiring process, it lessens your chance of maybe getting hired. So that's just my general feeling. Let me think on it more, Shiloh. I know you and I will talk later on this week, so let me think on that more, but I think it's a really good question. So number 11, we got 2 more left, and then we got to wrap this up. If you know who the hiring manager is, should you reach out to them directly? Yes. If you're LinkedIn connected to them, and that's the only extent of the relationship, then probably not. You can do it in a certain way. We've talked about it before, about reaching out to them on LinkedIn, asking them for their expert opinion on your resume and your qualifications for the role, and you'd love to hear their feedback. You can do it that way. But if you're really close with the hiring manager, or you worked with them at Baker Hughes 7 years ago and they know you by name and they would have a good recollection of you, yes, 100%. Email them, call them, check in with them, let them know what you're doing because they're your friend, and hopefully they're your friend. And you'll find out pretty quickly if they like you or not, because maybe you think they liked you and they actually don't. And then they'll be like, oh yeah, I'll forward your resume, and if you don't get a call, they didn't like you. But usually it'll help you. And then our last point for resumes. Listen, your resume is not your 6th grade term paper. It doesn't need to be in a plastic sleeve with a little plastic binder on the side with a clear cover. This is a resume. I've gotten resumes on thumb drives. I've gotten resumes on CDs. I've gotten resumes in plastic binders. I've gotten them in professional folders with a little mini CD. Listen, all that stuff is great. But this is your resume. This is a professional resume. This is not a term paper. So make sure that when you're doing your resume, it's like a professional report of your accomplishments. All right, with that, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. As always, if you liked what you saw here, I would desperately appreciate you to share it with other people. I would appreciate you going over to my YouTube channel, which is Hired How to Get the Job, subscribing there. So that way you can get this content as well as the other 8 weeks worth of material and content that I've put out there. I try to capture everything on YouTube. And with that, I hope everyone has a safe week, safe weekend. And we'll catch you again next Thursday, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. As always, bring me your questions and I'll do everything I can to answer them. Thanks so much. Have a good day. Bye.